community. My name is Noah. I'm very, very excited today to be hosting Certik. Everyone knows who Certik is. Chase, Kayvon, before we get started talking about KYC and all things Certik, give us a quick background of who you are and how you found yourselves to be working in the crypto industry.
Yeah, I'll start. So I started my crypto journey, as I like to call it, in 2017, just as an avid user, investor, and basically just fan, and kind of got deeper and deeper into it. And then after college, I was working at an anti-money laundering firm, doing some stuff with banks and whatnot, but I still never lost that interest in crypto, and I wanted to get my foot in the door somehow, and Certik provided that opportunity. So I kind of just security is a fun, and I think it's something that'll always be around. So I thought it was a good opportunity, so I kind of just went for it.
Yep, and for me, so this is Kayvon. I first kind of really started working in crypto in 2016. I joined as like a consulting analyst out of college, and that coincided with the 2016-2017 bull run. At the time, there were like a lot of big companies that were looking into blockchain, if you remember that. And so that was like, the kind of the big thing. So we were working with a lot of the major Fortune 500s to come up with like blockchain use cases, strategies, all that stuff. And that just kind of took me down the rabbit hole. And then about a year and a half ago, got really interested into the security side of things. I think in Web3 in particular, like, the security is just so much more impactful and different and exciting than it is in the traditional kind of Web2 world. So yeah, I saw Certik was the leader in the space, applied, and have been writing ever since. It's been fun.
Right on. Okay, so let's dive in. Chase, Kayvon, tell us briefly how you believe Certik has grown into a household name and leading security company in Web3.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know how familiar everybody is with Certik, but just a little background. We were founded in 2017. We're based in New York City, and we've done over 3,000 different audits with thousands of different clients. And how we kind of became the leader in this space, I credited a large part to who we hire. I mean, I've been here for over a year now, and it's funny whenever a new hire comes on board, everybody gets an email, like a little background information on them and stuff like that, and I'm always impressed with like their background, their knowledge, and that kind of stuff. So I think that's a big part in why we've grown the way we have. Just who we bring on, the amount of knowledge we have on our team. That, and I would say how we're always looking for new products and services. Like we don't just want to stick to audits. We kind of want to create that whole security loop. So we're always looking for new ways to innovate, bring more security to the space. And I mean, I'm sure we'll dive deeper into all of our products later. But yeah, we have a wide range of them, and I think that really gives us an edge above a lot of competitors.
Awesome. And, you guys just spoke to some components that led to tremendous success on your end. Curious to know how big your team is.
Kayvon, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're at a little over 300 total, I think, including full-time and interns. We have a company Slack channel, and it's a little over 300, so I'm guessing it's around there.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, about 300 people now.
Sweet. Chase, Kayvon, Certik recently closed a Series B round, which valued you guys at over $2 billion. Would you briefly tell us a bit more about who was involved and what this means for your future?
Yeah, so it's obviously like super exciting for us. I think just about a year and a half ago, we just crossed like the 200 million valuation, and then we nearly 10x within that time frame. So latest round, we had a lot of big names in it. Goldman Sachs was a notable one, Sequoia, SoftBank, Co2, Insight Partners, Tiger Global, basically all the kind of top VCs in the space. And One thing that, in doing the fundraising round, we realized is like security is such a foundational part of the ecosystem. And it's something that a lot of investors are interested in because they understand that, there are all these like grandiose visions of like where crypto and Web3 can go. And like, we really buy into those. But if you're constantly getting hacked and rugged and scammed, it's harder for that type of vision to come through. So really for us, what we're trying to do with that money is build as much foundational technology and services as we can to help kind of close the loop on the space, as Chase mentioned, right? We're not just an audit firm anymore, right? We're a one-stop shop for all things security. And so our founders, as Chase mentioned, are research professors from Yale and Columbia, and they really bring that sort of R&D mindset into the company. So we have tons of engineers that we've been hiring recently from top institutions that are helping build out like back-end engines to like improve our tooling, finding different ways that we can kind of close the loop in the market. Like NFT security, for example, is a really new area, and we've seen a lot of hacks and scams recently in that space. So we're kind of building in the background and going to use a lot of that money that we raised to introduce some more of those kind of active monitoring services to the market. So yeah, I guess overall, it's been very exciting, and we're looking forward to using that.
And at a high level, from start to finish, how does a Certik audit work?
Yeah, so our process, it starts with the onboarding. So projects will come to us and they'll let us know, like, what piece of code that they want reviewed. So it's always a little bit different, right? So there's no one size fits all model or like one standard timeline or price for the audit. You have some projects that are like super simple and like, might be like a fork of a contract that hasn't had much changes, or they could be just completely massive new chains or DeFi projects or whatever, right? So first step is really kind of reviewing the code and trying to understand like what type of effort is this going to take, and at the same time, what type of engineers do we need to put on this, right? We have different folks within the company that are specialists in DeFi, specialists in like blockchain gaming, stable coins, right? So making sure that we have the right people kind of set up for it. Once that takes place, then we onboard the code into our audit accelerator. So that's a whole platform that we built out that helps our auditors do their job, right? It's kind of like their, it's kind of like their bionic side, where we have like a lot of tools in that do kind of an initial scan of the code base against our formal verification engines. And that's like a little bit more of an automated process where we try to see if there's any sort of low-hanging fruit that we can detect in terms of tooling and technology. Then after that's done, our engineers will go in and they'll do a line-by-line review of every single piece of code that's written in the smart contracts. And we have two engineers on each one so that they can kind of bounce things off each other, make sure that, if one person misses one thing, that the other person is able to catch it. Once that's all kind of said and done, we have like a preliminary report that we prepare and we send over to the client. So we'll have the project kind of review our findings, talk it through with them. If they have any questions, there's a little bit of back and forth. And the project is then going to go and actually implement those fixes, right? So they'll go in and see, which one of these findings are important and like, they actually need to change, or maybe some of them, they might disagree with us because it's part of like the function of the code. And so there's some back and forth there. And then the project will submit like another round of reviews once that's all said and done, give us like the latest contract version, and our auditors will go in, make sure all the changes are fixed, make sure kind of no new changes were introduced like because of the fixes. And then if it looks good to go, that's basically the final step of the process. And typically we publish our audits on Certik.com for the community to go in and read them and have it kind of be accessible.
So you guys not only dive deep into the nuts and bolts of things, but you also work with a wide array of ecosystems and various crypto projects from across the space. There isn't anything that you wouldn't particularly say I'm not touching or I'm not working with. You guys are willing to take on any and all protocols.
Yeah, for sure. We work with all ecosystems. I mean, as far as we are partnered with Binance and Polygon, so like we do a lot in those space. But as I mentioned before, with like the team of engineers we have, not only the knowledge but the numbers, we can really bring on a lot of projects from a lot of different ecosystems. So like recently, I've had meetings with other ecosystems and projects in, say, Algorand didn't even know that we audited projects in that ecosystem. So we're trying to make that push outwards to let everybody know that, yes, we do audit every different ecosystem. We can bring on clients whenever. But yeah, I mean, we don't limit it just to one or two ecosystems. We kind of do the whole wide range of ecos.
Gentlemen, why do you think that so many protocols continue to get exploited despite passing these rigorous audits? I mean, you guys seem like you dive deep and do your best to make sure that things are sound and secure. But despite that, we're seeing exploit after exploit, especially in the last 6 months.
Yeah, that's definitely been an ongoing issue. Trust me, we see it firsthand. But one thing is like a common misconception I'll say with audits is that it's a pass or fail. At least for us, I can't speak to competitors or anybody else in this space, but there's no pass or fail. Like we find the vulnerabilities or issues in the code, we highlight them, and then we give recommendations to the project on how to fix those. But we can't force them to do so. So we highlight all that in the audit report, which can be found on Certik.com because we make all those publicly accessible. But so we go through, we find the vulnerabilities, and we recommend to the project how to fix those. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and we're sure to show that and be transparent about that. But I mean, another common misconception is that security is kind of a one-time thing. Like a lot of projects, oh, I got audited, we're good to go. But then they do new releases, new contracts. So it's something that is an ongoing thing. You can't just do one audit and be done. Because that's something we see very often. Is like whether it be us get the blame or somebody else, but we audited a contract for a project last year, but then they came out with all these different updates, new contracts, which we haven't seen. So that's one of the main problems that we've seen is projects continue to update and change stuff, but not get that audited, and then that becomes the problem. If that all makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And unpacking that a bit more, how often do you think a project, and I do believe that this is going to differ from protocol to protocol, but how often do you believe a project should get audited?
I mean, there's no really set time, I wouldn't say, but yeah, it does depend on the project. It differs for everybody, but anytime you do a big change or have a new release of some sort, I mean, we're happy to work with projects like back to back and have an ongoing relationship, but I would just say anytime there's a new release or big change in the code or anything like that.
What are some common problems that you guys see across all ecosystems?
So at the beginning of the year, we did a state of DeFi security report. It is kind of a yearly wrap up of what we found in 2021. And the most common problem, ironically, was centralization. Because everybody preaches about decentralization in the space, but it's rarely actually implemented. So that's one of the most that's the most common attack vector that we've seen to date, and that's one thing that we've been trying to push and educate people on. It's like, yeah, everybody talks about decentralization, but then the project owners have straight control of the funds or something like that. So that's the biggest problem we've seen. You can see that with the trends in rug pulls and scams and that kind of stuff.
So Certik is moving towards becoming a one-stop shop for all things Web3 security. Can you tell us about what other security products and services that you guys have built out?
Yeah, we have quite a few. I'm sure Kayvon will touch on our KYC in a bit, but we also have Skynet. Skynet is basically a 24/7 surveillance for contracts. It monitors and displays on-chain insights for smart contracts. And so it's basically running in the background at all times, and it can identify any anomalies or any active flash loan detections and has liquidity monitoring and all that. So that's kind of we typically see that being used the second most in pair with audits because it is, I mean, it's very affordable. It's very useful for projects and users. It gives, so if anyone's been on our website, you can see the trust score, which comes with Skynet. So anytime a project gets Skynet, they get a score. And that score it ranges wildly, but it's a weighted index of signals that we've developed. I mean, there's dozens of different signals that go into that, but it's a weighted score of, say, market community score and our our security signals that we've created. So it's kind of a overall like community feeling, and then looped in with the security thing, because with Skynet you get social sentiment, like how people are feeling about your project. I'm not sure the whole insight to it, but so like you can go on Certik.com and see how a project is trending on Twitter, like whether people are talking positively, negatively. So that's another thing we've created. And then Kayvon can touch on the KYC, which is one of our newest products, which we're really excited about.
Yeah, Kayvon, as Chase mentioned, you are the KYC expert. So starting out, can you tell us a bit more about the Certik KYC product and the inspiration behind that?
Yeah. So our KYC product was inspired by a couple of different things that were happening at the same time over the last like bull market in 2021, call it. One thing was people were just starting to lose faith in anonymous projects, right? Like in 2021, we saw like rug after rug after rug, and almost every single time it was an anon project. And for us, like anonymity, I think, is a core thing to the space and something we as a company like respect, right? We work with anonymous developers all the time. We think that, even Satoshi himself is anonymous, right? So it's not like the anonymity is like the bad part. It's people using anonymity as a way to like get out of being accountable in these types of incidents. The other thing was there was like a very famous incident last year with Wonderland DeFi, if you remember that. Ended up, yeah, it was like a massive, uh, you know, really trending DeFi project, but then they found out the CFO was tied to like a massive Canadian exchange, like I call it rug or whatever it was. It was like a big fraudulent scheme, and he was the CFO of this like massive project, right? So the project essentially went down once that took place, right? So we were also seeing this trend where like people were getting into these DAO communities and like they were building things together, but they didn't know each other, right? Like they didn't vet each other and they had no idea who's like behind the scenes on that. So with all of that, what we realized is like we could be this sort of trust broker in between investors and the community and like the projects themselves, right? So that's when we built out our KYC product. So our KYC product, it's intended to let project teams stay anonymous, right? So it's a KYC focused on teams especially. So what teams will do is they'll come to us and they'll say, hey, we want to get KYC verified by Certik. So they'll go through our process and I'll kind of get into the details of that. And we're focused on doing two things. One is verifying that we have the identities of like every single person behind the project that's like a key team member verified. So a lot of times projects will try to like send fake people to come KYC with us. Like our system is kind of designed to catch that right away. And then once we actually have these people verified, the second part of it is like doing an investigation into these people, right? So do they have any sort of like relevant criminal history, like being involved with like fraud or money laundering or anything? Have they been involved in any sort of past scam or rug pull in this space, right? Do they have like a bad reputation of some sort? And then I think aside from that, just seeing if there's any sort of like other types of red flags that we can detect about these individuals. And once they kind of pass through the rigorous screening process that we have set up, then we're able to kind of issue a certification on our website. So if you go on Certik.com, you can see that there are projects, some of them have like a KYC badge. And that validates to the community that we vetted these projects. We have their identities kind of in hand, and we won't reveal their identities in public. We're never going to dox these people, but we can serve as like a trust broker that we vetted these people and we know that they're not like scammers or anything of that sort. So yeah, I guess at a high level, that's the inspiration behind it.
So with all that said, they pass through your KYC audit. You guys give the community and people looking at them from the outside the green light that, hey, they're okay to get involved with, they're okay to invest with, do your own research, but we have vetted them. They're trusted members of the community. However, and you guys don't ever plan on doxing them. However, if they were to act criminally, or rather they were to rug or their behavior resulted in some sort of exploit, would they then be doxed on your end?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our policy is that we never dox individuals, but what we do is we built out like a very strong connection to law enforcement in the background. So we have a lot of our team members that are on the KYC team. They have backgrounds like at the FBI or like State Department, global kind of police forces, and so what we've done is build out a network with them where we tell projects, if you do go through our KYC process, you're agreeing to put some skin in the game. You're agreeing to hold yourself accountable. If we do find explicit evidence that you rug pull, then we're going to report you to the FBI, and we're going to make sure that we take every step that we can to prosecute you and hold you accountable to the community. So actually, a good example of that was we just had a project go through our KYC process. It was called Zoro Inu, and we just published a huge blog post about this. So go on Certik.com, read about it. But basically, this project went through our KYC process. We didn't find any red flags on the individuals at the time. We verified them, all that, and then they ended up rug pulling to the amount of $3 million. We got alerted by the community about this, did our own investigation, and since we had the identities of the people, we immediately reached out to our law enforcement partners, and we have kind of an active case that I can't really talk too much more about the details that we're pursuing with them. And obviously, since we have the identities of all these people, we have the explicit evidence, we have like proof of private keys, it's really easy for law enforcement to then go and actually pursue these people versus if they were just anonymous people rugging on the internet. So we're going to take kind of every step that we can to hold these people accountable if they do kind of go through our process and like end up defrauding investors explicitly like that.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Kayvon, I want to jump in and talk more about your KYC process, specifically how it's different from the typical ID check KYCs that we see in Web3.
Sure, yeah. So most of the leading KYC providers, like you said, it's literally just an ID check, or like some of them will have like a little bit more steps in it, like ID check and maybe like a proof of private keys or something like that. So for us, we go through a 4-step process that we built out, starting with the founder interview. So we have a professional background investigator that actually hops on a Zoom call with the founders and does like an extensive 30 to 40 minute interview with the founder. From there, what we were able to do is identify kind of all the key members of the team, and then we have them go through our AI-based ID verification process. So from there, we try to make sure that we collect as much IDs from like the key team members as possible. We run them through a couple of different databases. We do liveness checks to make sure that they're not fake IDs, they're actual people behind the IDs, and like we can actually use some sort of computer vision to verify like the video recording that they take of themselves actually matches the ID. And then the other aspect of it is like, how do we know that these people are actually part of the project team? So from there, we have a team that does open source intelligence and tries to map all the people that have verified to us like back into the project itself, right? So that's doing things like verifying their Telegram account and then going into the Telegram group of the project and verifying that these people are like mods, or like, is there someone that's like a key member of the project that we're seeing in the Discord or the Telegram or on Twitter or something like that that hasn't gone through our process. And so that's very easy for us to flag. And then finally, we do an on-chain analysis. So we'll collect all of the team members' wallets and we'll try to do some sort of analysis to make sure that they're not involved in like, soft rugging the project in the background or doing any sort of shady things with their own wallet and like, misappropriating kind of user funds. So it's a pretty extensive process, takes about a week to kind of go through that end to end with like a lot of different experts kind of involved in it throughout. And at the end of it, we do kind of give that verification. So I think our KYC right now has some of the lowest pass rates in Web3. And, it's not something that we're trying to like, it's not something that we're intentionally doing is like failing projects out of the KYC process. But I think a lot of times projects are used to KYC in crypto, meaning literally I'll just like submit some fake ID or like my own ID and that's it. And then they go through our process and they're like, oh, wow, I can't, cheat the system here. So yeah, it's been highly effective so far.
And just so I have it on the record, your KYC verification is accepted by launchpads and exchanges, correct?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So every single exchange that takes our audits right now also takes our KYC. So, the Binance of the world, KuCoins of the world, and then a lot of the major launch pads that we have kind of existing partnerships with, they all recognize it. On top of that, we're building out a network with a couple of venture capital firms too that are going to start accepting it. So a lot of teams now, they have to go through a KYC process before they can raise VC funds. So that's another kind of key partner area that we're building out.
What does compliance with AML and GDPR regulations mean?
Yeah, so AML, it means anti-money laundering. So what we do, so there are like some very kind of strict laws in the US in particular, um, where like individuals will be blacklisted or they'll be set on like AML watch lists. And what we do is we kind of go through and make sure that we like screen for those types of individuals, right? So we'll go through all the government systems and like that are publicly available and like check to make sure that none of the people we're verifying are on those systems, which is obviously like a major red flag, right? Indication that they've maybe been caught up in some past scandals or something like that. And then GDPR is a regulation that's been passed in Europe. So basically, that is like a data privacy and protection act. So for us, like if you are going through our KYC process, like we as Certik have a duty to protect your data as much as we possibly can, right? So we make sure that everything that we do in terms of like acquiring people's data, storing it on our systems, and like making sure that only people on our investigative team have access to these identity data. Like no one else in the company can even access these types of things unless there's like a very specific reason to. So that's what GDPR kind of stands for.
Kayvon, before I move on to some other KYC questions, with respect to the verification process, is there anything from the 93 points of verification that you would like to talk more about, or about the process at all, that I haven't asked about?
Yeah, so I think, so yeah, you mentioned like we have like a 93-point verification system. So what that does is like it helps standardize our investigations into these project teams. So every project that comes through our KYC process goes through kind of the same process, right? So that helps kind of keep things standardized, keeps like a very high level of quality. It prevents us from discriminating against a particular project because we have like specific things that we look for every single time. So there's like points that we look at in terms of like, has this project team been involved in any sort of past scam or rug? Are we able to actually validate that these people are part of the project? Are there any sort of broken links between the claims that they make during the interview and then what we can find on the open source, right? So maybe like the founder will say that, oh, I'm the only person that's involved in the project. And then we'll go on Telegram and we'll see that there's like 10 other team members listed on the moderators, and just kind of any sort of red flag that we can find there. So yeah, that's those are a couple of the key items that we look through, and then there's just like a whole kind of list of others as well.
You mentioned grabbing the team members' wallets and just keeping an eye on those to make sure that they're not involved in any sort of sketchy activity. What else do your on-chain analytics consist of?
Yeah, so looking at like the team member wallets is one part of it. So that's kind of a static snapshot, right? So the date that the team is KYCing, can we see any sort of past evidence of like them committing any sort of money laundering or scheming investors, or doing whatever, like a soft rug from the wallet. But then there's also a continuous angle to that, right? So we have a couple of systems that we built in house that are like active on-chain monitoring systems. And so what they'll do is like this system will monitor these wallets in real time. So any project that goes through our KYC process will also kind of be entered into this database so that we can kind of continuously monitor them and make sure that, maybe at the time of the KYC, they didn't rug investors, but then after they got their badge, they got super excited and they, thought it was like a good opportunity. And so what we'll do is we'll make sure that we catch that, and we make sure that anything from there on out is something that we look into from an on-chain perspective.
Kayvon, your risk assessment is performed by experienced intelligent analysts and background investigators. Can you give us a bit more insight into their credentials?
Yeah, definitely. So our team is exceptional. I mean, even I shouldn't be one to be talking about like a lot of this stuff. I think As I mentioned before, like most of our investigators come from like professional investigations teams. So we have, folks from like the British military intelligence units. We have folks from the FBI, State Department, kind of research think tanks. And it's a kind of wide array of backgrounds where, some folks are kind of more specialized in certain parts of the process. And that's kind of where they focus on, right? So, we have an individual who is a professional background investigator and has spent like most of his career doing interviews with individuals and like making sure that he can pick up on little cues, right? So once you spend like 10 to 15 years really just doing these interviews consistently, it like trains your muscle. And so he's really good at like catching any sort of discrepancies, catching red flags about behaviors, all that. We have folks who are more on like the open source intelligence side, right? So they're able to kind of go in and really like dig into the web and like really find like things about individuals that like you wouldn't be able to do with like just a plain Google search. And so they bring a lot of that experience from like the outside kind of criminal justice world, and then kind of helping to bridge the gap where they have both that level of credentialing from those institutions, but then they also have like the Web3 specific knowledge that it takes to actually really go in and like and verify these people.
And how big is this team of investigators?
So our team is 6 people right now, and definitely at any point in time we can also access like other people within the company. So maybe sometimes one of our investigators will find something on the on-chain side that we want to validate with one of our security engineers. So we'll kind of tap into our audit team to come help out with us, or if there's something that we need a data scientist to kind of help look into about an individual's like ID or like background or anything, we can access that as well. So it's like 6 core team members, but then kind of expanded out with the rest of Certik ready to help at any given point in time.
Are you guys hiring more of these guys, or staying at 6 for now?
Yeah, we prefer to keep it like a smaller elite team for now, and obviously as needed, we'll kind of grow it out. But I think keeping a smaller team dynamic is a little bit preferred for us because it just kind of helps create more synergy. People can like bounce ideas off each other more easily. Less meetings, kind of bureaucracy, all that.
Kayvon, what gives Certik an advantage over its competitors when evaluating international teams?
Yeah, so our investigators are actually based all across the world. So we have individuals in the US, kind of across geographies in the US. We have team members that are in Europe. We as a company have team members in China as well, right? So for us, we intentionally did that because Web3 is global and like crypto is such a global thing, where we knew that we would have to have like the capabilities to do this type of KYC for like people all across the world, right? So our team members are versed in like many different languages. So sometimes we'll have interviews with founders who only speak like one language or another. So we're able to kind of access different kind of language experts or like cultural experts at any given point in time. Our systems are designed to capture IDs from like over 200 countries, so we can like tell whether or not an ID is fake, not just from the US, but like anywhere in the world, basically. We have law enforcement contacts with folks in the US, but then we also kind of have that expanded network outside of the US that we're actively building. We have like risk models that we've built out internally where we can do country level risk assessments, right? So not every country is going to prosecute crypto crimes the same way. So if you're a project team that we can verify your KYC identity and you're based, like, say, theoretically in North Korea, and you end up rug pulling, like, there's nothing we can do, right? But if you're in a country like the US, US has shown a lot more appetite, especially recently, for prosecuting criminals within the Web3 space, right? So that's something else that we've really kind of learned and factored into our methodology, is like making sure that we're able to distinguish between projects that can be held accountable versus like the projects that can't really be held accountable.
And what are some common red flags that you guys are seeing in higher risk project teams that go through the KYC process?
Yeah, I think one of the most common ones is verifying the smart contract developer. So one thing that we noticed is sometimes we'll have like a project team come through and like super legit project, all the individuals are very transparent behind the project. Maybe they'll have like 4 or 5 people behind it. But all of the kind of core people behind the team are not technical. And so we'll ask them like, who is writing your smart contracts? And they'll say, for example, it could be like a random developer based, in Eastern Europe or something like that, that they never met and they hired off Fiverr. So that's something that we've noticed is like a massive red flag. And we actually had a case like a month ago where a project had a random developer that was in charge of the smart contracts, that they didn't know who that person was. So we failed them through the KYC process. And literally after we failed them, like 2 days later, that rogue developer ended up rug pulling from a piece of code that no one else kind of knew how to read, and ended up kind of leaving the project, right? So in those types of instances, you can't really hold the project team accountable that had no idea what was going on. But like the developer has become a critical part of our process in terms of red flags. Other types of red flags that we've noticed is if there's any sort of like discrepancy between the story that the founder gives and like what we can find online, right? So sometimes there might be like a mastermind behind the scenes of a project, but they'll send like a couple of the lower team members to come verify with us, and then maybe like throw them under the bus if like anything goes wrong. So that type of stuff is pretty common as well. And yeah, I think those are some of the most common ones.
Can you give us an example of an instance where that's happened?
Yeah, so we had a guy come through and KYC, and it was very clear that this guy was like just a low-level community manager or something, but he was like pretending like he was the COO of the project. But then the minute we started asking like details about like the other team members of the project, we asked him like describe the project use case, like, just very basic questions about the project. He started freezing up and like basically just like ended the interview. So yeah, I think as you mentioned, like our like a lot of projects think that our KYC is just an ID check, and like for us, it's like definitely not an ID check. Like don't come to our KYC if you think you can kind of cheat the system like that.
Amen. So with all the recent regulatory and law enforcement news, could Certik KYC help project teams stay ahead of the curve?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's something that we've seen an uptick in terms of like projects that want to go through our KYC process. Sometimes these projects are already even doxed, and like, the developers are very open and like the founders are very open, but then they'll still go through our KYC process because they want to protect themselves. Right now in crypto, there's like a lot of changes in regulation. Like the FBI just started prosecuting a lot more insider trading cases. So people are like a little bit nervous about where this is going to end up going and like how things are going to take shape in the future. And one kind of value proposition of our KYC is that it helps to validate these project teams and like prove some goodwill down the line if there were any sort of regulation or any sort of interaction with law enforcement, where they can say, we went through a KYC process, we tried our best to stay compliant. It also helps with investors, because a lot of times like these big investors and institutional guys, they don't want to invest in like projects that might be might be a red flag of any sort. And so the KYC helps to build legitimacy, at least around the project team, right? So what you were saying around like AML regulations, right? Like project can go through our process and then validate to investors like, we've been screened for AML, we're compliant, we're doing everything that we can on our end to prove that goodwill, so that down the line, if these types of regulations come through, people are going to trust these projects that have gone through like a reputable, legitimate KYC process more than ones that haven't.
Kayvon, you've given us plenty of reasons why the community should trust the Certik KYC badge for projects, and also how Certik would respond if a project that KYC ends up rugging. You said, the identities of the project's team will remain anonymous. You guys never dox them. However, if there is malicious activity happening or a rug or an exploit, then you would hand those over to the proper authorities. That much is clear. I would love to hear you give us some more insight into what a Certik audit badge, or excuse me, a Certik KYC badge means for them, for the project interfacing with other communities and other exchanges and other launch pads in the crypto space.
Yeah, I think it gives them credibility. It shows that they have some skin in the game, right? Like that's the big thing with anonymous teams right now, is that there is no skin in the game, right? They can do whatever they want and end up, rugging or like defrauding people, and then there's no accountability on the other side. So really putting in that accountability and like going through a rigorous process and like proving out your goodwill is something that I know for a fact that exchanges are starting to look at in terms of listing, but also investors and also other communities, right? Like if you're a community and you want to start like promoting a project or like partnering with another DAO, you want to make sure that the people behind that DAO aren't like, for example, serial scammers that came from Quadriga, or like, in the case of like Wonderland DeFi, or they're not, individuals that may have been involved in like several rug pulls in the past, that like clearly indicates that they're going to do something again, right? So you're really proving to the community that you're a transparent team. You're really proving to the community that you're putting some skin in the game, and that you have like nothing to hide really. And again, I think I want to kind of hammer that point home about anonymity and like preserving anonymity, because our process is not to go against the anonymous ethos of the crypto space. It's actually, we're trying to find a way to make anonymous teams like feel enabled and like thrive in the crypto space without actually having to put themselves out there. A lot of people, they might choose to stay anonymous because they're in a country where it might be a little bit dangerous if they dox their identities, or rules and regulations don't allow them to be involved in crypto, or whatever the case is, and we respect that. But as long as you can prove that you're going through a rigorous process, I think that helps us kind of be the broker and the trusted brand in the middle there.
Kayvon, we've noticed the rise in fake audits and KYCs from scam projects. What are some things that investors should look out for in order to spot some of these fake KYC certificates?
Yeah, I would look into the company behind them. We've seen a ton of these fake KYCs. We actually just did a little research investigation, and found it's like a very kind of common and prevalent thing. One thing I would tell community members is always look at like the source of the KYC, right? So if a project is showing like a certificate on their website that says KYC'd by Certik, anyone can make a Photoshop certificate, but can you go on the Certik website, look that project up, and actually validate that they have like a KYC badge on the source? That's why we put a lot of emphasis on the security leaderboard, because projects can come to our website and like they don't have to depend on the project to highlight which project passed through KYC. Like we will prove that for you. And most of the other legit KYC providers can do that as well, right? So the first thing I would look into is like, who is the project behind the KYC certification, and like, can you go verify that they already actually passed through the process? And if you can, I think the next thing is like, what does this process entail, right? So there might be like a fake company that was made that pretends to be like a KYC company, but then you actually look them up and like you realize like this actually isn't even a legit company. So those are like some pretty like low hanging fruit in terms of how to verify these. Like really just go to the source and like don't trust the. It's like the whole ethos of like don't trust but verify. That's I guess like the best way that projects can prove that.
And you'd say the leaderboard is probably the best way for people to learn more about projects that have successfully completed Certik's KYC process?
Yeah. So if you go on Certik.com, there's like filters, and you can filter for projects that have Certik KYC, and then just kind of like really focus in on those projects.
But yeah, just to add to that, like that whole verifying thing, it goes for everything. Audits, like whatever anyone claims, because we have a Certik Alert Twitter account where we kind of do real time updates on scams, rug pulls, hacks, that kind of thing, and we find almost daily that people are sending in projects that claim to have Certik audit or KYC or anything on their website, but it's not on Certik.com. And so we always just reiterate that to head there. Everything's listed there. Don't trust anything outside of that, because we've seen more and more that projects will kind of use Certik's name or brand to kind of create trust with the community, even though they're lying. So I just always want to reiterate that to users too. Just because you see it on their website, don't trust it. It's very easy to head to Certik.com, search the project, see if it shows up or not.
Kayvon, Chase, how do you guys feel about anonymity in the Web3 space moving forward?
I think it's super important. I think there might end up being like two different worlds in crypto. There might be like the institutional crypto world where anonymity is like not really a thing, right? So like projects that really want to integrate into banking or like, traditional corporations or whatever. And then there might still be like the second world of crypto, which is a little bit more rogue, and it's like the anonymous kind of really like, non corporate kind of version of that, right? And I think especially in the latter, anonymity is going to be something that's going to be crucial. I think anonymity helps like protect a lot of developers when they want to experiment with like new things. So a lot of new DeFi projects, like they might be in some sort of gray area when it comes to like financial regulation. So the developers behind those projects, they might be scared and worried, like, hey, I'm just writing a piece of code, but like maybe this code will get me in trouble, and I don't want to do that. I just want to focus on the tech and the innovation. So being anonymous really kind of helps enable that. And I think for us, like we really see like anonymity is something to preserve and like to enhance. Like how do we make crypto a place where people can be anonymous for whatever reason that they choose, but at the same time have some sort of skin in the game, have some sort of accountability, have some sort of kind of like vetting, and let that go. So I know like Vitalik, for example, is like writing about soulbound tokens, and like that's an idea where you have like a token that's tied to your on-chain identity, that's only kind of ties to one individual, where you don't have to actually like reveal your identity, but like all of your kind of proof of on-chain activity gets aggregated back to this like soulbound token, right? So we're almost trying to become like the soulbound token for project teams at like the identity layer, in terms of teams, and again, just kind of really help like preserve that anonymous ethos within crypto.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I remember whenever we first did the announcement for our KYC, a lot of people were like, "Oh, Certik's out here doxing everybody," and we tried to reiterate that that's not our plan here. That's not what we want to do. It's like we're securely storing the information. We're not doxing you. And I mean, as I always say, like the anonymous, it goes with the ethos of what made crypto and what got us here today. I mean, if you go back to Satoshi, even like it's a very big part of what made the space, and I think it's a very important aspect of it. So yeah, that's my take.
And audience members, if you want to learn more about soulbound tokens, we had David Shin, head of global adoption for Clayton, on a few weeks back, and he was able to go in depth to what those are and how those can be really beneficial going forward. Kayvon, Chase, I only have a few more questions here, and then I'm going to go ahead and open it up to a few of our audience members. Curious to know where you see the industry going in the next 2 to 3 years in terms of KYC. I know that we just went on the whole anonymity spiel, but do you think that there are any distinguishing features with the former?
Yeah, I think there's almost like two types of KYC, right? There's like KYC at like the individual level, and then there's the KYC at like the project team level. So at the individual level, I feel like as crypto becomes like more institutionally adopted, and there's just like it kind of transitions from being like this wild wild west to like a more kind of safe, secure, legit place. I think inevitably there's going to be some level of KYC that's going to be required. So like maybe in the future, like certain DeFi apps, if you're in the US or some sort of regulated territory, you have to kind of KYC and associate your name with that wallet, and like that type of stuff, right? So that, yeah, I feel like is probably kind of trending in that direction. I think at the project team level, it's something that is like integrating as like a must-have, right? So like 3-4 years ago in crypto, like most people didn't look for audits when they wanted to invest in projects. Most people didn't even know what an audit was. But like nowadays, like if you're going to invest in a project, like one of the first things that I do as an investor is I look to make sure that that project team was audited, and audited by a reputable company. I think KYC is going to end up being the same thing. I think it's going to be, is this project team KYC'd, and are they KYC'd by like a reputable provider and company? And I think, our mission is to come on to like platforms like this, where, you guys have like an engaging kind of educational community, and like really inform the community about what our KYC process is, and like how it can kind of help build trust, and like, create some sort of assurance for investors to ape in safely and not kind of worry about things.
Yeah, I mean, KYC through the space, like in the space, has changed a lot over the years. I remember when I first started, like my crypto journey, you really didn't have to KYC for any exchanges or anything. I remember my first one, I think it was Kraken or something. You had to hold a piece of paper up next to your head with your name and date and all that stuff. And it's just crazy how much it's changed through the years. But I mean, as far as trends, I think with the amount of rug pulls and scams that we see, unfortunately, it's going to force KYC a lot more. And I mean, unless the whole space kind of gets a hold of that and solves that problem, I don't think KYC will be going anywhere.
That just made me think of a question. What do you two think, or what do you think about KYC and regulation coming after decentralized protocols? How do you think that's going to play out?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think recently, like the CFTC, announced that like Bitcoin and Ether were, known as commodities and not necessarily securities. So I think that tug of war is still going to play out a little bit, but at the end of it, I think the question really becomes like, how decentralized are these protocols really? And as Chase said, like the number one finding we have during our audit process is realizing that most of these smart contracts are centrally controlled by like one wallet or one entity. And even if that ends up going to like a multi-sig and a DAO, I think there is still some sort of hierarchy and some sort of structure in place where no project is really fully decentralized, right? And it's more of a spectrum. And I think that's probably where the regulation is going to end up going, is like having some sort of litmus test to like, are you sufficiently decentralized enough to like avoid kind of these like specific regulations or like incidents, or are you like claiming to be decentralized, but in reality it's like two guys with private keys that control pretty much the entire the entire protocol.
So while I was preparing for this AMA, I stumbled upon your blog and was able to find some very informative articles on KYC, but curious to know what other type of articles we can normally find published.
Yeah, I mean, we have a whole lot of stuff on our resource section on the website. So I mentioned earlier we have the Certik Alert Twitter account, and with that we have two teams of incident response. So after any hack or rug pull or anything like that, they kind of go through and do a whole analysis of what happened. So that's been a big part of our blog lately, is kind of letting users know, like, in a simple step-by-step way of what happened with these big hacks, what went wrong, that kind of thing. And then on top of that, we also have many educational blogs, just whether it be very basic crypto knowledge, like what is KYC, what is decentralization, like that kind of stuff, just very basic knowledge, like, to people, so people can learn that stuff. And then we also do reports. We do like a quarterly roundup and yearly roundup reports of, so like I mentioned earlier, our state of DeFi security. So that kind of goes through everything we saw in 2021, the most common types of hacks, the most common scams, and then it also goes macro, like what trends we see in the space, such as last year was like the boost of NFTs and that kind of stuff. So those are our main kinds of content on the blog. But we also have a Discord where we kind of are just starting. It wasn't created too long ago, but that's a good place for users to go and kind of have that person-to-person conversation about security or just general knowledge, whatever you want to learn about. So like we have different topics each week. It's like I think last week it was different types of wallets, like what's the best use, and especially now with this Solana fiasco we're seeing, that's definitely a hot topic. But yeah, all in all, it's a wide range of things you can find on there. So I would encourage everybody to kind of go check it out and see what fits your needs.
Gentlemen, is there anything that I haven't asked about that you want to go into and expand upon?
Nothing comes to mind for me. I don't know about you, Kayvon.
Yeah, no, I think that that we covered KYC pretty in depth. So yeah, pretty good.
Awesome. Gonna call on a few community members here, starting with Aisha, and I'll get to a couple more.
Thank you, Noah. Okay, recently we have seen increasing number of bridges exploits. So I was thinking that can Certik penetration testing service expose the vulnerabilities in the bridges to prevent exploits by hackers?
Kmart, do you want to take that? I'm not too knowledgeable about the pen testing.
Yeah, definitely. So bridges are tricky, right? Bridges, the way that they work is it's almost like you have two applications operating on different chains. So say you have like a bridge between Solana and Ethereum, and I'm like super simplifying here. But basically there has to be some sort of track record where like if I want to transfer $50,000 from like Solana over to Ethereum, the bridge has to deduct a balance of 50K on one chain and then add it to the other chain. So there is like a big kind of smart contract component. So we've been auditing a lot of the major bridges recently from like a smart contract perspective. And then the other aspect of it is the penetration testing. So to your point, like we can actually uncover a lot of that. So right now we're working with Ronin Network and Axie Infinity. So they had a massive bridge exploit like a couple of months ago, and the bridge exploit was actually nothing to do with the smart contract layer. It was the way that they stored their private keys on AWS that ended up getting hacked. And so what we're doing with them is kind of looking at all different angles of that. So both on the smart contract side and then also on the penetration testing side. And for anyone that doesn't know, pen testing is a little bit more like your traditional kind of Web 2 cybersecurity. So we'll try to do everything that we can to kind of hack the bridge and like break the bridge and try to see, aside from just smart contracts, what other types of things can we do there? So definitely a big area of focus for us this year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for explaining that. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Aisha. Don Coyote, you're next.
Hey guys, hey gentlemen. Thanks for this awesome topic. My question was, what do you do about like teams that have passed the KYC process? They've created their projects and communities, and for all intents and purposes, have tried their best to excel as a project, but fail for any number of reasons. And you have community members reach out and say, "Hey, this project team has rugged. They've run out of funds. Like my project's going to nothing." Do you have like analytics that you kind of rate different projects for this type of thing, or is this kind of just up to the investor after the teams have been KYC'd and their project doesn't succeed? That's just up to them.
Yeah, so we try not to pass too much judgment on like the project side. Our KYC is really focused on like the team itself. So whether or not a project succeeds, like there could be like legit projects that don't end up succeeding, and then there could be like not so legit projects or like meme coins that all of a sudden go to the moon and like do extremely well, right? So it's kind of hard for us to judge on that side. But what we do, to your point, is like if a project ends up like failing, and we have community members like reaching out to us about like, oh, this is a KYC project, I can't believe they failed. We'll do an investigation and we'll try to make sure that there was like nothing malicious done, right? So like they didn't do like any sort of hard rug pull on the wallet itself. So we have an on-chain team that can go in and make sure like that wasn't the case. There's no evidence of like the team kind of conspiring to fail the project like right away, right afterwards. So it's not really like a black or white thing where we'll go and hold the projects accountable if they end up like failing, but it's more so like what ended up happening, what was the context there, and like was there like any sort of malicious intent that causes us to respond from that side.
Yeah, I'm on the.
I mean, do you put anything out, like if say a project makes an NFT project? This is just an example. They make like another 8 project, it fails, and then they're like, okay, well we're gonna do a dog project, but we're KYC, like it just didn't work out for us. Do you then like reevaluate, even though they're KYC'd, but now they've made like just an unsuccessful project? They had good intents, but just didn't work out. Do you do anything at that point?
Every single project that launches, we reevaluate every single time. So we have had many instances where like the same team will try to do like multiple projects because, to your point, like maybe their first one didn't work or they want to pivot or whatever. And so what we'll do is like we start as a clean slate basically. So we'll reevaluate again kind of from scratch. And then one thing that we do factor into our process is really looking at like the old projects. So sometimes what we'll see is like the old project, there will be like Reddit threads that we'll find on our open source investigation that say like, this previous project that they tried launching, like they actually have like some sort of conspiracy, or like they purposely tanked the project or whatever. And then when we're reevaluating the new project, that'll be something that we'll consider in our evaluation. And if we can actually validate that they tanked that project on purpose, or it was just a cash grab, or like, they ended up rugging, we won't recertify them for the new project. And like, the new project is like completely different in our view, right? Like they can go out and claim like, oh, hey, we're the same team and we previously had a KYC, but then this new project, is the same team. But like, if you don't see a badge for that project on our website, there is no verification of that project.
Awesome. Thanks for all those awesome answers.
Alrighty, next up we got Bullish Pizza.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
sir.
Yeah, so my question is, if I am thinking to bring my own project to KYC, what requirements do I need to fulfill? I mean, fees and other structures. And Web3 is a hot trend, it's the future, right? So I understand we can't expect so much in current market situation. So what do you expect from Web3 in next bull run?
Yeah, so in terms of requirements, it's everything kind of listed out. So you'll go through an interview, we'll do an ID and documentation check. So we'll send you a link that, has you kind of like take a picture of your ID, take a selfie, and then it goes through a process of like scanning that. And then we'll also ask a couple of more questions in terms of like, providing some sort of evidence that you've like registered your website under your name, proof of private keys, that type of stuff. So all in all, like the whole process for the project for you and your team will only take about an hour. It's relatively easy to do, but then on our side, on the back end, we go through and we do like kind of our end-to-end investigation. Typically, it takes about a week with all the information that we collect. And then I guess second part of your question, in terms of where Web3 is going, it's a tricky one. I think in the long term, like most of us are here because we're extremely bullish, and I think for us, from a security perspective, like we feel the same way, right? Like we're here to secure the ecosystem because we think that it's gonna end up doing great things long term. I personally just don't know, like if it's going to be like in 3 months or a year or 2 years, whatever. Optimistic that it'll be sooner rather than later, but
yeah. No financial advice.
Yeah.
All right, no problem. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
Mr. Sayed Rahmat, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. Okay, so I want to know, will Certik only report teams involved in fraudulent and malicious activities in U.S. territory to only the U.S. enforcement authorities, or you will also be reporting to the law enforcement authorities of different countries, depending on the team belongs to different countries?
It's a great question. Yeah, so we do both. So what we do is we have like a very tight network within the U.S. specifically, and the U.S. law enforcement system has kind of like a very broad international community. So for us, like we'll go through the U.S. channels first and have them kind of in parallel go through and like go to the local jurisdiction where these identities are. And then as a next step, then we'll go and try to find like where is the individual located, and then what can we find in terms of like a network there to report them in their local jurisdiction. So that helps us kind of cover all surface area, right? So we have us kind of working with the local law enforcement over there, and then at the same time we have federal law enforcement in the U.S. that's going in and digging into their network to try to see what they can do.
Okay, got it. Thank you for clearing it up. Thank you so much. Over to you, Noah.
Thank you, Sayed. We got Elwin Lewis.
Hey, how are you? It's great to hear about the Series B funding, and I've loved listening to, the in depth about everything you guys do already. From the KYC to the audits, to the real time monitoring with Skynet and everything. With all that funding, are you looking to just expand the current services you have? Are you looking to branch out into other aspects of crypto, DeFi, Web3, all that? So I'd be interested to kind of hear what the future of Certik might look like.
Yeah, Cameron, you can add on to this at the end if you want. But I mean, for the most part, we're always looking for new ways to kind of advance security. I mean, this year in the last year or two, we've already came out with a few different services and products. Like we just released our bug bounty service. So like we're definitely never happy or complacent where we are. We're always trying to find that next edge and the next thing that. I mean, our mission is to secure the Web3 world, and that is not a easy task, but it's something we're always looking to kind of what can we do next? Where can we help out more? So yeah, I would definitely say we're never complacent or happy. We're always looking for new tools, new services, whatever we can do to increase the security in the space.
Yeah, one other thing
Awesome.
to
Thank
add
you.
on to that is we have a big focus right now on NFT security, and like gaming and NFTs in general are like a little bit different than DeFi in terms of like what's been happening. So if you've seen in the NFT space, there's been a ton of like phishing links and discords and Bored Ape owners getting hacked through that type of mean, and you know, those are like they're pretty unique in like the type of security needs that they want. And then in terms of like on-chain monitoring, like we're thinking to build out some cool products in the NFT space around like wash trading, verifying like if an NFT is legit or not. You know, is it like is some insider whale kind of just pumping up the NFT price? Is this an NFT that has been part of like a hacked wallet, right? So that type of insights. So definitely, I think the NFT and gaming space is something that we're looking to expand into as well as that kind of gains traction.
Thank you. Thank you. Great answer, and definitely looking forward to it.
Audience members, thank you for the questions. I think it's a great place to wrap things up. Chase, Kayvon, I really appreciate all the time that you guys put into working with us, and would join us in the future to talk all things crypto security, blockchain security. So before you leave, for audience members that are just joining in, give us a quick summary of who you both are, what Certik is doing as far as the KYC end, and why people should now more than ever be cognizant of crypto security and the Web3 future.
Yeah, so you know, my name is Kayvon. I'm the head of our KYC product at Certik, and I think you know, I went over our KYC product and how it works. So Certik KYC is a very rigorous identity verification process for project teams. So project teams will come to us. They'll go through a very extensive process where we validate their identities, make sure that they have no sort of past criminal history and affiliation with other rug pulls and whatnot. And then from there, you know, we hold those projects accountable if they end up defrauding investors. So that's, you know, kind of a service that we're really excited about. And I think Certik in general, we're a one-stop shop for all things Web3 security. So not only audits, but KYC, Skynet, which is more of our on-chain monitoring tools. We're about to launch our bug bounty program, and a lot of different things that are yet to come with that $2 billion fundraising round.
Yeah, and my name's Chase. I'm the social media marketing manager. So I don't get too into the technicals. I kind of try to stay in my lane for the most part. But in my role, I do see kind of firsthand how users are affected by security, like not enough security in the space, if you will. So on that end, I just say we're doing what we can to help users and make them feel safer, and make sure to use the website, all of our resources we have to kind of learn on the user end what you can do to be more secure, what to look out for, and that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's about all I got.
And my name is Noah. You guys are listening to Whale Coin Talk. Audience members, remember that everything you hear on our podium is for educational purposes only. We do not ever give financial advice. We are here to serve as a podium for you to come and learn about various projects and protocols that are being built across the crypto space. Kayvon, Chase, thank you again so much for your time. Best of luck.